The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, welcome to this free 30-minute quick overview about how to move from or shift from a job focus to a performance focus, which obviously is very appealing to any manager or anyone who is a business owner, or basically anyone. Now, I want to talk a little bit about it in relation to the job description, because obviously the job description is critical. It's the work document that we've used for the last 100 years to pretty much document what people are supposed to do on the job. Although I've been very critical of the job description, and as you can see on the right-hand side, you've got a book I wrote a couple of years ago on this whole subject, and I really wanted to talk about really moving towards a holistic performance concept, and that's what I'm going to talk about here today. So look, we've got a fair bit to cover. If you've got any questions or comments, you can basically go to the right-hand side and click on the question box and type them in, and I'll deal with them when I see them. I'm the only one that gets to see them. The other thing you can do, of course, is you can come back to me and follow up after our presentation today. But I just want to talk about the value of non-job roles and how critically important they are in performance. And I think not enough has been said about this. And I think it's time that we started to review the incredibly important role that these non-job roles play. Talking about a process now about how you might move from a job description to creating a role description. And it's not just another name. It's not just new wine in old bottles. It's really a different concept completely. And I'll talk about that. And then perhaps just touch on some KPIs that you could use for your non-job roles that might make some difference. Now, probably the most influential management consultant in history, when I say probably, I'm pretty sure he would be, was the engineer Frederick Taylor, who came in on the assembly line on the Ford Motor Company, notably, and basically did time and motion studies and looked at all the different aspects of putting a car together, and basically created a one best way approach. So it's very much a focus on a precursor, if you like, to our franchising system that we've now got in place. And you can imagine that out of this scientific management concept was the whole notion of job description. So essentially that's where the job description came from. It is part of that scientific management approach. So what I'm arguing now is that they've served their purpose, but I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we shouldn't have a work document. We absolutely should. I just note that we've got a few issues with sound cutting in and out, and that's why I've taken myself off the webcam. So let's hope that everything is working well. Unfortunately, that's always a problem with this. Look, could I just, if you could hear me loud and clear, could you just type in the word clear or something like that, just to let me know that you are hearing? Okay. Natalie says she can't understand. Okay. All right. Well, look, I'm just going to have to plow on. The good news, of course, is that we've got a recording of this coming up. But what I might do is I might just plow on and just hope, like anything, that things improve in the presentation. But I can see the sound check is quite poor. So obviously we've got some internet issues. So the job description basically lets people know what they have to do at work. And I guess the problem with the job description is that it has this legal disclaimer at the bottom, which I'm sure you're aware of, that says something along the lines of, you are required to complete any other duty not on your job description deemed relevant by your manager. In other words, you think to yourself, well, why would we have a job description? What is the point of that if in fact we can't state it in the job description as such? Now, in the book, I talk about 3 different levels of or evolution of job descriptions. So the first generation, and this is pretty much after the scientific management movement in the early part of the last century, we had the first generation of job descriptions, which were essentially the tasks. It was a list of tasks that people had to complete in order to do their job. So there was a kind of a list of tasks there. The second generation was very much around, looking at people's competencies. So the shift was away from the job and towards people and their competencies. And so that was, and we're pretty much in that, we're still in that phase right now. And then the third dimension, which is the one that I'm promoting now, is this third dimension of the non-job roles and competencies. And what I mean by that, of course, is looking at the non-job roles we're referring to. All right, how's our sound going? Yes, Natalie, it will be better, I can assure you, but I'm afraid I'm just going to have to plough through because there's absolutely nothing I can do at this stage other than to continue. So you will receive a copy of the recording, of course. Now, the other thing about the job description that's really important is that every single thing that we do, all the human resources practices in organisations are pretty much centred around the job description. So, for example, we recruit and select people based on the criteria or the competencies in the job description. We tend to induct people by going through their job description. We tend to send people off to training courses and develop them on the basis of the competencies that are required in the job description. We tend to remunerate people on the basis of the job description. We actually tend to promote people into managerial and leadership roles on the basis of the job description. And of course, we review performance based on the job description. So the job description's got a pretty strong, it's got a pretty strong handle on the workplace that we know of today. And I think that's a dangerous thing because it's too focused on task and not focused enough on these non-job roles that I mentioned earlier. So I have a statement here that I want you to have a think about, and it's a bit provocative. It might sound a bit strange, but I do believe it. And that is that the roles people play in organisations are more important than the jobs that they do. And essentially what that means is that we can't ignore the non-job roles in organisations. I'm just going to try something here to perhaps improve the sound. Let's see if that makes any difference. I hope so. All right, so let's have a look at what I mean by that. What I've actually done is I've looked at non-job roles, and I'm just going to draw this up and show you how it works. So if you think about the work that people do, essentially it's twofold. On the one hand, we have a job role that people do, and essentially that's covered in the job description. And that's the technical requirements of the job. That's the skills that people have, that are required. And that's normally covered in the job description. In fact, and we do refer to that quite extensively, of course. But the problem we've got with that is that I believe it's only half of what performance is all about. So let's look at the other aspect of performance. And this is the aspect of performance which I refer to as the non-job roles that people play. And now for the last 20 odd years, people have been, academics and scholars and so forth have been sitting around recognizing the value of non-job roles, but not really being able to, identify what they are. Okay. And really not identifying what they are. Sorry, I was just looking at a message there from someone. And I guess what these scholars and academics were doing and researchers, they were looking for a generic set of non-job roles that were applicable across all industries. And they found that very difficult to do. So I bit the bullet and thought in 2000, 13 that I would identify 4 of those that I believe are critically important to any organisation. So let's have a look at what they are. The first one is a positive attitude and enthusiasm. Now, this might sound a bit controversial, but I do believe that that's an important requirement in performance. I actually think, and I'm not expecting people to come to work bouncing off the walls, but I actually expect that if people are going to come to work, that they shouldn't be whinging, whining, moaning, complaining, passing the buck, all the things that we see every day in our workplaces. We expect people to be solution focused. We expect people to be, to have a general attitude and not try and a generally good attitude, not try and undermine the team or the work group that they're involved with. I think that's fair and reasonable. And some people will say to me, and they'll challenge me and say, yes, but how do you measure that? Well, I think it's relatively easy, actually. I think I could sit in your workplace for 20 minutes and I could actually tell who's got the positive attitude and who shows enthusiasm. And I think if I compared notes with you at the end of the presentation, at the end of the 20 minutes, I'll guarantee we'd probably both agree. Okay, so it's not that difficult to work out. And of course, you can use critical incidents, and that's one of the best ways of being able to demonstrate to people that they need, that attitude is critically important. Now, the second one that's critically important is the team role. Now, we're all expected to operate in teams. The organisation now is less hierarchical than it was in the last century, and people are now expected to work with people that they've never worked with before for periods of time that might be short, medium or long term. So clearly being a team player is a critically important attribute of the 21st century employee, I'm sure you'd agree. So again, you hear people saying, I'm not a team player. Well, you need to get to be a team player because it's critically important in this workplace that you demonstrate that. So I think the team role is critically important, and I think again it's not normally listed in the job description, and because these things aren't listed in the job description, the problem is they're probably not adhered to as a result of that. The third role is the skill development role. And the skill development role is very much the role about developing and improving oneself and continually growing in the role. And I think that this is critically important because if someone decides not to do that, then in actual fact they're going backwards because everything else, of course, is growing and developing. But here again, you'll often hear people say in the workplace, will you not, that people will say, I don't like using that new spreadsheet. I'm quite happy to use the old system. Or I'm too old to go to that training program. Why don't you send somebody else along? So we hear this sort of thing all the time. But in my view, one of the core non-job roles that do impact on performance is a person's capacity to continually grow and develop, and I'm sure you'd agree with me. And the fourth one is I expect people to come to work with some thoughts and ideas about how the workplace can be improved, to bring their ideas and suggestions and to start looking at how they can make a contribution in terms of making the workplace more effective. And again, it's very rare, is it not, for people to come up and bring their ideas along with them to work. So you can see that these 4 non-job roles I think are critically important. And I think that if you just think about this for a minute, if you had a team of people who are highly technically skilled, so in other words, they fit the bill on the left-hand side, so they're fit for the role, they have excellent skill sets, but these same people had a terrible attitude. They were all individuals who wouldn't work together. They've stopped growing and developing, and they're also not making and offering suggestions about how the workplace could be more effective. Now, you can imagine what sort of workplace that would be, and I guarantee it wouldn't be a high-performing workplace. So if we really want to shift from a job focus to a performance focus, then we've got to take into account the non-job roles And these are four that I've identified. I don't doubt for a minute there are many, many others that you could probably identify, but these are the four at this stage that are critically important. Now, if you doubt that, a bit of research that was done a few years ago actually asked 9,000 managers around the world in lots of industries, across 21 industries. They simply asked them the question, what is the most valuable job attributes that you are looking for in an employee? And here are the top 10 attributes that came up. And I think that what this shows us or illustrates very clearly is that we value very highly non-job roles. So if you actually cast your eyes down that list and you look at those top 10, it's very obvious that there are no technical capabilities there. In other words, in this day and age, we expect that people have those technical capabilities. That is just a given, that when you engage somebody, that they will bring with them a reasonable level of technical competence. So what we're really looking for, of course, is non-job attributes that will make that extra difference, that value add. And you can see there that the list is very much around those non-job roles that I referred to. So let's not be under any illusion that non-job roles are critically important from shifting from a job focus to a performance focus. Now, the difference between a job description and a role description, let's be clear about what I'm really on about here. A job description usually defines a set of specific tasks and responsibilities that are performed by a particular job holder, okay? But a role description, I beg your pardon, defines the job role. In other words, it takes into consideration all of those things that are in the job description and adds to it basically four non-job roles that I've just mentioned to you. So essentially what I'm saying is that an employee in the 21st century is expected to play 5 roles. They've got a job role and 4 non-job roles, which of course I've gone through with you. So you can see that there's a difference. And the good news really is that it's not very difficult for you to be able to rejig your job descriptions and turn them into role descriptions, because all you've got to do is add those non-job roles that I went through before and, of course, give value to that, make sure that people are adhering to that. In other words, it's not just tacked on at the end, as a series of bullet points. Now, what I wrote in the book is that I've got a situation where I've identified each of those non-job roles, and what I've done is I've given you a series of competencies around each of them. So here's just an example. So you've got here, we expect, if there was a criteria around this, we would probably suggest. So if there's a criteria around this, we'd probably be saying that the criteria would be that people would be solution focused. So if I'm looking for someone that has a positive attitude and enthusiasm, I'm looking for someone that's solution focused. I'm also looking for someone that's autonomous, and that is somebody that's prepared to back themselves and not be continually relying on their leader in certain situations. I'm also expecting somebody with a reasonably positive energy level, and of course that's not hard to read. So a high energy level, an autonomous approach, and being solution focused. So the book actually takes that another step, and then under each of those criteria you've got 10 key performance indicators. So you can, of course, measure them the same way that you could measure job roles. For the team role, I have 2 criteria, and one is leadership, which might seem a bit strange, but I look at leadership in terms of that person's ability and willingness to influence others within the team and the organisation in a positive way. And because that's part of being a good team player, isn't it? But then on the other hand, I'm also expecting that they're going to be accountable for two things. I want them accountable for team success, obviously, and to feel a sense of accountability for team success. But I also want them to be feeling accountable for their own particular work within that team. Just want to check the sound now. Is the sound coming across better? Could someone just indicate to me? I know some of you have hung in there, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, good. It sounds like it's a little better, which is great. So look, let's keep moving. The skill development role has two dimensions. I would have an expectation that people would work and develop themselves as people as one particular aspect of that role, but the other one would be their technical development. So that's the training and the education that they do. And I think if they're doing both of those things, then I could honestly say that they're fulfilling their skill development role. But again, it can be measured, and all of these things can and should be measured. Now, moving on to the final one, innovation and continuous improvement, I'm expecting people to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. I'm also expecting that people who are innovative and continuously improving are customer responsive, which might seem a little strange. But at the end of the day, if they're constantly thinking of their customer and how best to service that customer, then it's likely that their innovations and continuous improvements will be very much around directly or indirectly improving that customer responsiveness. And that's the key point I want to make there. So in the book, you've got 10 key performance indicators around each of those criteria, which is obviously very useful because you don't have to go out and reinvent it. It's done for you, which is wonderful, because you just have to photocopy those off and put them into the job description, turn your job descriptions into role descriptions, and away you go. But I think one of the things I'd like to touch on as I come towards the end of our presentation today is that you need to do this in a collaborative way. If you just sit there and develop your role descriptions without talking to anyone, it's likely that they will criticise it and they certainly won't own it. So in other words, we want people to be engaged and involved in this project. So the key thing is it's got to be a consultative process with the people that it's directed towards. But it doesn't have to be too onerous, because I've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you by giving you those non-job roles, which I'm sure you can't argue. You wouldn't argue with me about it. I've even given you the key performance indicators. So you've got all the framework, the infrastructure, if you like, to be able to do that. So when you're talking, when you're collaborating with other people, what you are doing is trying to contextualize those as much as possible for your industry. So for example, the dynamic duo method is really just getting two people who basically do the same job to get them together and start to run through and contextualize those non-job roles. So that's one strategy you could use. Another strategy, of course, is if you've got a team that basically all works together, they're pretty much a generic team, they do the same job, such as a customer service team, then I would suggest that you sit down with them and get them to work through it as an exercise around how they might contextualize those non-job roles. Another method, of course, would be for the supervisor to sit down with their team member and come up with some criteria that might be suited to that particular situation. And the final one, and there are other ways as well, is the single employee method. If there's only one person who can do the job, and that's not unusual, by the way, if you've got one person who has a unique job, no one else really has too much understanding of what that is, then it may be that that person would sit down and contextualize those 4 non-job roles. So you've got a number of different strategies open to you, but the key important point I want to make in all of this is that you need to collaborate with people in order to make this successful, because if they don't feel that they own it, it's likely that they won't adhere to it. Now, has anyone got any questions at this stage? Notwithstanding, of course, that we've had some real issues with sound. I notice now that sound is looking pretty good. Certainly it is on my indicator here. But have any of you got any questions that you'd like to ask me in relation to shifting from a job focus to a performance focus? Okay, good. Well, no, that's fine. Okay, I just wanted to do a quick plug before we finish up today. And I just wanted to let you know that I've got a Lunch and Learn series coming up starting on the 1st of November, which isn't too far away. And you're most welcome to register for that, or to register some of the people in your team for that. You'll notice on the left-hand side, I've given you a list of the topics that we cover. The difference between the Lunch and Learn series here and what other people may do is that this is all done completely online. So it's done by a webinar format, and so there are 6 units. Each of those are an hour long. They occur once a fortnight, and people who attend those will receive a copy of the recording and the slides. And of course, they've got time with me if they choose to take that up via email or telephone. So if you'd like some more information about that, just go down to the bottom to www.winnersatwork.com.au /lunch and learn /. So that will give you a little bit more information if you like, or simply contact me and I'm more than happy to talk to you a bit further about how it works. But we've had some great success with it. People enjoy it. It means that they're not spending, hours traveling and accommodation and all of the other issues that go with the costs that go with the traditional training program. So we've had some great success. So folks, that's it from me. Thank you, and I apologise for 2 things. Sorry to change the date on you. But also the other thing is I apologise from the sound perspective. Not that there's anything that I could do at this end while I was running the webinar, but thank you. You'll receive a copy of the slides. You'll receive a copy of the recording, preferably this afternoon. So thanks everyone, and I wish you all the best, and have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.